I'd like to call the April 4th, 2022 meeting of the Wilson School Board to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Here.
Mr. Hart?
Here.
Mrs. Casper?
Here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Here.
Mr. Martin?
Here.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Negrini?
Here.
Mr. Schneider?
Here.
Mrs. Cocker?
Here.
9 present, 0 absent.
Please stand for the pledge to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Is it share.wilson.org?
Our first item is under communications. Dr. Fadley?
Thank you, President Cocker. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, I've received a few emails questioning the enrollment capacity and how that works in our school system, and how do we make decisions on when a school has reached capacity and when it is in need of additional capacity. So if you'll, Ryan, if you could blow that up just a little bit. If you'll take a look at the screen that's being projected right now, you will see our elementary schools listed with the total number of students from kindergarten through 5th grade across each one of those lines. Those enrollment numbers are taken out of our system as of this morning, so those are actual numbers. You'll see the elementary totals, which are listed from top to bottom, Cornwall Terrace through Whitfield. You'll see what's referred to as the functional capacity, which is when a school, according to PDE, reaches 90% of their actual capacity in the school. And then you'll see a total capacity as a elementary school, and that assumes that each classroom within that school is filled with 25 students. And as you well know, not all of our classrooms at the kindergarten and 1st grade level have 25 students. So the total capacity at the school makes the assumption of 25 students in every K-5 classroom. The functional capacity, again, is that 90% of that 600 number, which is prescribed by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. And then they use the number 85% of capacity as kind of the guide point where you start talking about the future and adding capacity to your school system. And this is standard in the education industry. So if you look at the far right, the over-under numbers, you will see that Whitfield has 84 is over capacity, 84 students from that functional capacity. And the next one would be Green Valley, followed by Spring Ridge, with 2 of our schools, Shiloh Hills Elementary and Cornwall Terrace Elementary, that still have 12 seats and 6 seats respectively. So there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of questions regarding, so what is this right sizing all about? The right sizing is to take a look at the future of our elementary schools that are either at or above total capacity or functional capacity, and redistributing students so that over the course of the next several years, that we won't have such disparate numbers, over numbers in some elementary schools, while other elementary schools are under. We do know as well that there are current developments that are going to be feeding into some of our schools, i.e. Green Valley, i.e. Spring Ridge, that will continue to escalate the total number of students in those schools. So again, the right sizing is an attempt to not have to spend taxpayer dollars to bring in classrooms, portable classrooms, across our system over the next couple of years, in anticipation that the district will continue to monitor the growth and the demographics over time to make sure that any future decisions are validated by what we're seeing in growth. So that's just a little bit for those of you that did submit your questions. I wanted to try to explain that in a way that was, was clear, understanding that there is a capacity at each one of our elementary schools, and there is what is considered a functional capacity, which is prescribed by PDE. So, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. Mr. Maravich, we don't have any on agenda items, so we'll wait till the end. Okay. We have no public participation on agenda items this evening. Executive session, the board did meet in executive session prior to tonight's meeting to discuss personnel, as well as the board met following the March 28th work session to discuss personnel matters. 2.1, approval of minutes. Request to approve the minutes of the school board meeting held on March 21st, 2022, as attached. Do I have a motion?
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Payment of bills. Mr. Negrini.
Move for the payment of the general fund, $6,833,324.18.
Thank you, Mr. Negrini. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second case.
Mr. Case, thank you. We have first and second. Any comments? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Superintendent's report. Dr. Fadley.
Thank you, President Cocker. This evening, I present the superintendent's personnel and program recommendations, and I do want to draw attention. Under the professional hire section, we do have Lauren Eiler, who is on the agenda this evening to be our newest Bulldog to teach at the high school in West, Spanish and French. So I'm looking forward to trying my Spanish out on our newest Bulldog, but don't ask me to do French.
Thank you, Dr. Fadley. Looking for a motion to approve superintendent's report 4.1 through 4.8 as presented.
McCray.
Mr. McCray, thank you. Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Any comments or discussion? Okay, roll call, please.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
5.
Lauren, could you please stand so we can all welcome you in the true Wilson fashion? Congratulations.
Mrs. Cocker,
Yes.
Can we vote on 5.1 by itself, please?
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
5.1, request permission to approve a trip for approximately 24 students in technology education to Germany and Switzerland from April 7th to April 16th, 2022, 4 days out of school, as previously approved through the Curriculum Committee. Cost to students is approximately $3,755. The cost to the district is 3 substitutes for 4 days. Students will be chaperoned by Mr. David Dunkelberger, Mr. Ryan Denny's, and Mrs. Nikki Denny's. The students will be traveling with a signed waiver from their parent. So we're pulling this out separately. Do we have a motion for 5.1?
So moved, Negrini.
Mr. Negrini, thank you. Do we have a second?
Schneider?
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Any comments or discussion? Okay, this is a voice vote, so all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion carries. 5.2, request permission to approve a trip for approximately 19 AP Environmental Science and AP Bio students to Chickentee Bay Research Station in Wallops Island, Virginia, from April 8th to April 12th, 2022. Cost of students is $450. Cost to district is 1 substitute for 3 days. Students will be chaperoned by Mr. Doug Doms, Mr. Wayne Sear, Ms. Carolyn Houts, Mr. Phil Yoder, and Ms. Steph Brock. Do we have a motion for 5.2?
So moved. Case?
Mr. Case, thank you. We have a second.
Schneider?
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Another voice vote, so all in favor? Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Under Student Services, 6.1, request approval of the summer hours for school psychologists, school nurses, school counselors, and school social workers as presented. 6.2, request approval of a service agreement with Cottage 7 Education at a per diem rate of $200 per special education services for the 2021-22 and 2022-23 school years. Individual compensation agreements for student slots will be approved when a placement is recommended. 6.3, request permission to approve the adoption of an addendum to the settlement agreement and release approved on June 22nd, 2020, to directly pay Hilltop Preparatory School an amount up to $63,700 for the 2022-23 school year tuition and services in exchange for waiver of previously agreed upon transportation and ESY services. 6.4, request approval for a 2-year service agreement with T-Mobile to provide 5 unlimited voice data plan lines at a cost of $29.40 per line for a total of $147 per month to provide wireless internet access for students under our Educating Youth and Youth Experiencing Homelessness. Looking for a motion to approve Student Services Agenda Items 6.1 through 6.4 as presented.
Casper.
Mrs. Casper, thank you.
Hart?
Mr. Hart, thank you. We have a first and a second. Any discussion? Okay. And I have one point to make under 6.1, because I believe I brought this concern up previously, that the discrepancy in hours provided to elementary school counselors versus middle school and high school counselors. I believe we received an answer, but Dr. Feeley, would you be okay sharing the same answer that we received to that?
Certainly. The hours are determined through the Office of Student Services in conversation with the counselors. In the past, the elementary counselors, I believe, received 45 hours. Now there are 2 counselors at each one of the elementary schools. They receive 30 hours each. The secondary counselors at the middle level, 60 hours. And the high school counselors, 180 hours, as the high school counselors do work with scheduling requests throughout the course of the summer, as well as requesting transcripts and those types of things for students so that there is continuity of service. In reference to the school psychologist, that is contractual through our collective bargaining agreement, and our school nurses as well receive not to exceed hours so that they can do portions of their jobs that are required during the summer.
Thank you for that explanation, Dr. Feeley. So we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Operations, 7.1, request approval of a service agreement with KRE Security LLC to provide security for the high school pending solicitor review and approval. Looking for a motion?
Schneider.
Mr. Schneider, thank you. Do we have a second? Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Any discussion? Mr.
Mr.
Martin?
President, yes, I have a few general comments on here. When we hire this security person, is this person going to be the same person every week? Also, do we get a chance to interview that individual before we hire him? And while I agree that this is something that we need, I think the long-term approach would be to, I know there's been a position open for some time, but I would like to recommend that we put some extra energy into filling that position. That's it.
So, Mr. Martin, the answer to your questions are both yes. We do have the ability to interview the individual. At least for the course of the remainder of the school year, is a retired police officer. This particular company services 4 current Berks County schools as well as multiple schools in Lancaster. And then we are looking for a long-term solution for the replacement of a security guard in the future. And those are conversations that are ongoing with my team.
All right, thank you.
I believe the contract calls that they are all retired police officers. I mean, it's still under review, but that's my understanding.
Okay, any further discussion on 7.1? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under Curriculum and Staff Development, 8.1, request approval of the 2022-23 Reading Area Community College Wilson School District Dual Enrollment Agreement. Do we have a motion for 8.1? Dr. Kennedy, thank you. Do we have a second? Mrs. Casper, thank you. Any discussion?
I just want to put another, I always like to plug the dual enrollment. I know for a long time, a lot of administrators here were obsessed with AP exams. AP is wonderful for a certain subset of our population, but these are guaranteed credits. AP credits are not guaranteed credits, and more colleges are not accepting AP credits. So I just think it's, I'd love to get the word out to as many kids as possible that dual enrollment is a really great way to go. It gives you so much more, coming from the college perspective, like room to breathe. When I have the kids that come in and say, I have 8 or 9, 9 or 12 credits, they're not so squished in their schedule, and they don't have to take 6 classes every time, and, especially for the Englishes and the psychologies and the healths that everybody has to take. It's just such a great idea.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Any other discussion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Martin?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Negrini?
Yes.
Mr. Schneider?
Yes.
Mr. Case?
Yes.
Mr. Hart?
Yes.
Mrs. Casper?
Yes.
Dr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Mrs. Cocker?
Yes.
9 yes, 0 no.
Under policies, 9.1 is the second reading of policies. Are there any discussion or questions before we move on to committee reports? Okay, the next meeting we will have a vote and third reading for those policies. Committee reports, BCTC, Mrs. Casper.
Yes, thank you, President Cocker. Our last meeting was held on March 23rd at the East Campus, and we had the privilege of getting a tour of our horticulture program at BCTC. They showed us some of the floral arrangements and some of the planted crops that they had in their in-house greenhouse. And we were introduced to 2 huge tanks of trout that the students have been raising as part of the new aquaponics system of the program. Aquaponics, I learned, is a combination of technology of hydroponics and fish rearing methods. I also learned that the horticulture students work closely with the culinary students to plan menus and schedule the crops for proper harvest. So that was something of interest, since we do get a nice dinner from the culinary students there when we attend our monthly meetings. So if you want to learn more about the horticulture program at BCTC, you can always check out their website. This week, students will be participating in the Skills USA State Leadership Conference in Hershey, PA. And I just wanted to give another plug, just a reminder that it's still not too late to register for a career camp this summer for students in grades 6 through 8. The deadline to register is May 20th, and you can check the website for more information. That's my report. Our next meeting is April 27th at the West Campus. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Casper. Student Services Committee? Mrs. Casper, do you have one? Sorry.
Sorry, no, we have not met. Our next meeting is this Wednesday at 4.
Thank you. BCIU, Dr. Kennedy.
The BCIU has not met since our last meeting. However, I was lucky enough to sit in on, as a early childhood expert on their 5-year review for Head Start, where it's very much like a college review process where they look at all aspects of the organization and how their budgets run and how their classrooms run, and it was a really interesting experience to see all the major hoops that they have to run through to get federal funding. There was $10 million on the line at this meeting. So I thought it was really interesting, and I'm continually impressed with the way the BCIU runs things. So that was really good.
Thank you.
I'm going to pass curriculum committee off to Mr. Schneider because I missed the first 10 minutes of the meeting. So go for it.
Excuse me, yeah. We had a presentation first about changing the way progress reports for elementary students will be issued so that they're a little easier for parents to understand, just a simpler form. So that'll be instituted, and we'll look for parent feedback on that next school year. Then we had a presentation on illustrative math implementation, where we talked about the summer bridge program, which is where students can move in or out of, for lack of a better term, the honors track, and then how that's going to expand coming up with Algebra 1, 1A, and Geometry. We had a report and a request to up the department chair stipend because the current stipend hasn't changed for years, so after this, it will go to Human Resource Committee for their consideration. We got to look at a letter and the opt-out form for the PSSAs and Keystones. It will be going back to the system that was used pre-pandemic per guidance from PDE. And then we were presented the teacher professional learning, what happened on the 7th and the 25th in terms of curriculum, instruction, assessment, and environment, and a process that's like a 3 to 5 year plan for our professional learning development for the teachers. And our next meeting is April 27th, excuse me, at 4 p.m. right here.
Dr. Kennedy?
Thank you for subbing in for me. I just want to say about the PSSA opt-out letter. This is something that's been near and dear to my heart for a long time. The worst thing to happen ever to happen to education was No Child Left Behind in 2001. It started the structural decline of our schools and the obsession with standardized tests. It has limited our curriculum, especially in the past. It has really killed the joy for a lot of children, not just Wilson children, but children all over the United States, their joy of learning. It takes away multiple days of school learning for testing, and it hasn't gotten any better. When we implemented Race to the Top, I like to call that No Child Left Behind on crack and steroids, because that was when we tied our PSSA scores to our teachers' evaluations. I understand the stress that teachers are under, and because their evaluations are because of this bribery of race to the top tied to the scores of their children and the scores of the children in their school. It is a very, very unfair process. It's unfair to Wilson kids, but it's really, really unfair to our underfunded schools. I'm proud of where we're going as a district, but I know the district can't fight this because they have to do what they have to do. So I think it's up to parents to say what they said last year. 53% of the parents at West last year opted their children out. That's awesome. And I would love to see the majority of our parents say, we're done, enough is enough. We're not doing this. We have other ways to measure our progress in schools. We give standardized tests. We give the F&P every year to our elementary school students. Those test scores can be compared nationally. Our PSSAs can't be compared nationally because only Pennsylvania gives the PSSAs. So we have different ways of evaluating our students that are more accurate, that are more reliable, and that are valid measures of learning. The PSSAs are not valid measures of learning, they're valid measures of test taking. Even schools now, they're dropping the SATs because SATs are not a predictor of student success. High school grades are a better predictor of student success than SATs are. That's a proven, researchable fact. I think that I would encourage parents to do their due diligence, see the damage that these tests have done, and consider opting their students out. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kennedy. Mr. Negrini?
Mr. Martin raised his
No,
hand
go
first,
ahead.
so to be fair, he raised his hand first. So I'll defer to Mr. Martin on that if you'd like to,
Please go.
Again, there's long debate and discussion about how we evaluate, student progress, how we evaluate student success. Again, as there's multiple studies on whether or not SATs are or are not an indicator of success, there's reams of evidence on both sides. However, in terms of the testing of PSSAs, if a student is below basic in terms of their reading skills and their math skills, a question that's reasonably asked is whether or not that child should be promoted on to the next grade and or earning a high school diploma. I think again, I'm just looking at an article that I read in terms of the Baltimore School District. You had most scoring below basic in terms of reading and math skills, yet we're graduating with a diploma. Are those students actually ready to go out into the world, into the workforce, if they can't read and write? And that's a test of basic skills. And so I understand that there's all kinds of different opinions on teaching to the test, whether or not some of those scores are actual indicators of students and whether or not they've taken that test seriously, or they realize that the test in terms of actual grades and actually moving on to the next grade mean anything, and they certainly don't. But it is a way of looking at some general skills that are necessary to move on, and that's, I think, the point that is made on the other side, whether or not we're actually doing a disservice to those students by taking away some of those tests that do indicate those basic skills.
As an educator, I disagree. The test whether or not you can take a test. I passed a college-level statistics exam for my doctorate. I am not proficient in college-level statistics. I am awesome at taking tests. Now, that's, the flip side. I think there are better, much better valid measurements of learning than tests, than these paper and pencil tests. Do I think that districts need to be held accountable? Absolutely. Do I think we need measures of success? Yes. But the PSSAs are not that. We can't even compare ourselves with the people in Maryland because we don't take the same tests. So you get to make your own tests, right? So like, are your tests even really valid? So maybe in Mississippi, I always pick on poor Mississippi, what do their tests look like compared to our tests?
No, I understand, but if we have, for example, here, should a student be progressing from grade to grade to grade if they consistently test below basic, on those examinations? I think that's a valid question to be asked in terms of the differences between objective and subjective standards. That's,
May I just add?
The debate on that can, be forthcoming, and has been for years and years, but ultimately, in terms of objective standards, and you're right, there are ways to assess whether or not a child can take tests, and there are better ways to give a test or to provide assistance with taking a test. But, if some of those reading examinations test basic skills in terms of reading at a third grade level, et cetera.
That's the thing, they don't. Like, the one thing I did learn in college statistics are reliability and validity. Reliability is you can give it to the same people over and over again, and it's a reliable source of information. It's going to yield the same results. The other is validity. Validity, is it testing what it's supposed to test?
Right.
And the PSSAs are not testing reading. They're testing the ability to answer questions about a random story.
And we cannot measure all students by the same standards either. So for example, English learners will never be proficient on the test, not because they don't get the information, they're not able to acquire that information. It's a flaw of the test, not a flaw in the student. So we can't necessarily use the test to make determinations on whether a population of student has the reading level that that test is particularly testing for, because we know we can't measure English learners based on our systems of reading levels. They're just not going to do that. They're not going to be able to measure in the same way. But yet we still require them in many instances to take that test, even though they'll never be proficient. So with increases in population of ELs in certain areas of our district, we're already kind of selling ourselves short in terms of the outcomes that we're going to see. So, yeah, I mean, we could go on and on with this debate. But yeah, I mean, in terms of assessment, there are many other types of assessment that we can use to be able to know where our students are in terms of reading level, in terms of, their levels of proficiency in other areas, and not just math and reading. So yeah, I agree with you, Dr. Kennedy.
Dr. Fadley, with all of that being said, what impact will it have on school districts with the percentage of opt-outs increasing? How does that impact the
Say that
school?
again.
If we have higher numbers of students opting out of the test, what impact might that have on a school district?
It depends on which students are opting out of the test. It could have negative results in what's reported in the newsprint in terms of if the students that are opting out of the test are considered the higher performing students, and that could negatively impact what's reported in the newspaper.
It will also affect our participation rate. That was what was in our, in the letter. You'll see it has a negative effect on the participation rate. The state wants us to have a 95% or above. And I do understand why that was originally in there. It was originally in there because school districts were being sneaky, and they were saying, just don't show up special ed students. Just don't show up EL learners. say, to try and pad their scores a bit. So I do understand those participation rates, but that's what it'll most negatively affect.
Mr. Martin, you're waiting so patiently.
Yeah, well, this conversation, there's obviously could go on for hours, but there's a few things that I just want to make clear from my viewpoint is, I don't care where you're from, what color you are, when you leave second grade, you need to have second grade levels. So that needs to be addressed. Whether the testing does that or not, I'm not sure how that implements into the situation, but once again, I don't care. I want every second grade student, I'm just using second grade, to come, when they leave here, to have the basic skills to good for third grade. The second item, we do teach to the test, which I think is a flaw, and that's just because of the way that I know some of our subject matter comes later and after and in between. But I'm not in favor of that. If a teacher does their job and they know their curriculum for that year, you shouldn't have to spend what I consider very valuable time instructing students to take this test. So I could go on, but I'm going to end it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
I could go on, actually. Great topic. Just a question with regard to one of the points Dr. Kennedy made. And Dr. Faley, maybe you can talk a little bit about if we would just can the PSSA test and look at a national test. Have any Pennsylvania schools done that? Is there funding, if any, tied to PSSA tests that keep us doing this?
School districts are required to give the PSSA test. It's the parent that gets to decide whether or not to opt their child out. Certainly, the district could move to add a national standardized test that are used in multiple states, but it is extremely expensive to do so. But it is an availability as a tool to measure, I think, what Dr. Kennedy is referring to as across state populations across the United States. The PSSA is not an assessment that can determine how a graduate or a student in Pennsylvania is doing in comparison to a student in Maryland. But there are tests like Stanford 10 that are more uniform, standardized tests. And there are others, California Test of Basic Skills, CAT tests, that can also do that. But currently the PSSA is not an assessment that can be used to do anything but compare internally.
Thank you. All right. Everybody ready to move on to 11.5? Good. I thought that was a great discussion. Okay, Berks EIT, Mrs. Schlossman.
Good evening. The Berks EIT Bureau met for its quarterly meeting on March 31st. Highlights of the meeting include the auditors, Herbining Company, presented the calendar year 2021 audit of the EIT financial statements. Especially to note was the fact that they received a clean opinion. There were no findings in their financial statements. And the net local EIT distributions for 2021 calendar year were $149 million across all the Berks municipalities and school districts, and that was 5% higher than the calendar year previous. We also reviewed the first quarter of 2022 distributions. They were up 28% over first quarter last year for EIT, and local services tax collections and distributions were up over 15% over last quarter of the first quarter of last year. Twofold reason, one being increasing collections, but also we're still comparing the faster processing and distribution with the new tax software. So I would say it'll still take a couple more quarters for us to really be comparing the new tax system year over year. Also, we are looking at the tax filing trends online so far this tax season. They're pretty on point with last year. A little more than 20,000 returns had been filed by the time we had met. The business privilege tax program is being reviewed by attorney Jennifer Brown, who who is looking at the various municipalities' resolutions and ordinances to come to some consistent basis for the EIT Bureau to do a more enhanced job at collecting that tax. And our next quarterly meeting is June 30th. Thank you.
Thank you. Extracurricular committee did not meet individually because we had a joint meeting last Monday for our workshop. So I'm thinking we might schedule one next week. So our regular scheduled meeting will be next week, next Monday at noon upstairs. Facilities committee, Mr. Case.
Sure, yes, thank you. The Jeff Simcox and the facilities team have been busy. Number one, they've been reviewing additional gym sound systems for the high school gymnasium. Also, there's been options, they're looking at options for camera installs throughout the district. They're beginning a remodel of this building, the district administration building lobby, along with adding air conditioning. And they are addressing different areas throughout the district in need of cleanup, pressure washing, such as Southern Middle School and the administration building. Probably the topic everyone's most interested in right now, field bids are coming in. They will be opened on April 8th at 3 p.m. And then shortly after that, at some point, we're going to be reviewing internally with Crabtree and coaches and district leadership team to try and figure out, different cost options that are more palatable to the budget, et cetera, and what will be proposed for options to the public with regard to any kind of a survey potentially, and then a vote for the board. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Finance committee, Mr. Negrini.
Our meeting that was scheduled for earlier today was moved to April 12th at 5:30. Thank you.
Thank you. Legislative, Mr. Martin.
Not much is happening. They're on recess until next week. Not much happening on Fair Funding Act. That's still in the Supreme Court's hand for decision. One thing I did see that it was kind of bothering to me was, our Auditor General is the returning responsibility for audits back to the Department of Education. And to me, that's not a good segregation of duties. And one of the reasons for that, they're saying that they're understaffed to perform these. So I looked at some of the data in 2013 when they took over, and this is, the Auditor General took over the department in 2013. They had over 120-some auditors, and over the last 8 years, they've reduced that down to 46. So, okay, you have less people, let's figure that out. So I'm not sure it's going back. Somebody's got to do it. So are they going to have short staff in the other department? So this tells me that the Department of Education has a lot of people walking around doing nothing. They're going to absorb this. But I don't think it's a good idea to put that back in the hands of the Department of Education, because the purpose of splitting it was for, control purposes. So that's all I have to say. That's it for today.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Human Resources, Mr. Hart.
Our next meeting is this Wednesday at 9 o'clock.
Thank you. Public Relations, Mrs. Troutman.
Good evening. I just have a couple items. First, we are currently gathering input of our community regarding the proposed right-sizing project through a thought exchange. The exchange asks the question, what are some important perspectives to consider as we embark on balancing our student enrollment in our elementary schools through a right-sizing project? So we'll utilize the feedback that we receive through this thought exchange as we continue our work on the project. You can access the exchange on the homepage of our district website, and the deadline to participate is Sunday, April the 10th. We also would like to acknowledge the fact that the Reading Musical Foundation recently held their annual scholarship auditions, and 34 Wilson students received an award. Some of those students actually received multiple awards. These awards are based on merit and are the result of students dedicating an enormous amount of time and dedication to their instrument, as well as a reflection of our incredible team of music educators. According to the foundation, Wilson, by far, has the most representation in the scholarship program of any school in our county. So again, it speaks to just the amazing work of our fine arts department here at Wilson. We are also excited to announce that our district is partnering with the Cook Center for Human Connection to host a free virtual family mental health night on April 20th from 8 to 9 p.m. Participants will hear from a leading clinical psychologist, be able to ask questions, and learn about free resources available. We will be sending a communication to all families with the registration information, and will also be promoting it through our district communications channels. Families who can't make the live event will be able to visit parentguidance.org, which is also linked on our website, where there's access to on-demand virtual courses, professional support, and a safe community for parents to learn how to support their children and get answers to mental health questions. The Wilson School District is committed to continuing to work to provide solutions and help for those who are struggling. And President Cocker, if it is okay, I'd also like to do the student outreach update for Ms. Negrini, who is traveling home from a college visit.
Thank you.
Okay. This past weekend, there were 2 community egg hunts that Wilson students organized and volunteered at. On Saturday, April 2nd, the WEA hosted their annual community egg hunt at Whitfield, and numerous students volunteered to organize games and activities such as bracelet making, face painting, and even a petting zoo. Students also set up the eggs and helped out kids with the hunt. Additionally, on Sunday, April 3rd, the Interact Club organized an egg hunt for special needs students all throughout Berks County for students ages 4 through 21. The event had a great turnout, and high school students partnered with the kids who participated in the egg hunt on Bulldog Field. I'd also like to note that we received numerous thank you notes from community members who participated in that egg hunt. So just a great job by our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Troutman. Education Foundation, Mr. Case.
Yes, for the most part, I don't have a report, but I do want to remind everybody about the Wilson Education Foundation Golf Tournament and Spring Soiree. It is on April 18th, and it is there's a 9-hole sort of family fun 9-hole scramble at 10 o'clock in the morning till 12, and then at 1 p.m. there's the tournament. And I'm not quite sure if you still have. Is it filled for foursomes? There's still openings for foursomes. So get your foursome, get on out there, and there's also an after party with auctions and raffles, live music, dinner and cocktails. It's a great event. Come on out and support the WEF. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Case. Technology Committee, Mr. McCray.
We have not met since our last meeting. Our next meeting is April 19th at 4:30.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Moravich, do you have a solicitor report?
No report.
Okay. We do have some public participation on non-agenda items. If you would like to go over the reminder.
Rules of public participation for school board meetings pursuant to the Sunshine Law, Robert's Rules, and board policy. The following are the rules of public participation. Individuals attending this meeting are expected to conduct themselves in a responsible and respectful manner that does not disrupt the meeting. Public comment is not question and answer, but instead is an opportunity to offer comments on matters that are or may come before the board. In particular, personnel or student matters may not be commented on by the board, even if the employee, parent, or student is speaking because of confidentiality laws and rules. As it relates to questions, the superintendent may assign an administrator or may speak directly to the speaker after meeting to attempt to answer any questions raised by the speaker. All comments must be directed to the board as a body and not to any individual. Clapping, calling out, or cheering is not permitted, nor conversations in the audience. Individuals may not approach the board tables. Individuals shall speak for comments from the speaker's lectern. Comments shall be limited to 3 minutes per person, and I'll give the 1-minute warning. Any person making threats of violence may be removed from the meeting or may be cited by local police. The above expectations are outlined in Board Policy 903, which is embedded in board docs on the district's website.
Thank you, Mr. Moravich. First, we have Tammy Heener on Facilities Committee, 11.7.
Good evening. I'm not quite sure how the project has gotten way out of hand, $43 million plus your fields, but in my opinion, the project should be reviewed again and pared down to the needs and not the wants. I agree that for safety reasons, joining the upper and the lower house needs to be done. That's needed to be done forever. Renovating the auditorium to make it safe, and the heating and the air conditioning is obviously something we don't want anyone to be uncomfortable. But the needs and not the wants. There isn't a need for an AstroTurf field at the time. We have Southern, which has a beautiful field, which is only 3 miles away. We all have wants. I may want to live in Hawaii, but I can't. I mean, just inflation is the highest it's been in 40 years. We have more projects that the school is going to have to address in the future. And the school board should make reasonable decisions about spending the money. I do want to thank Dr. Fadley, Mr. Martin, and Mr. Case for thinking about the taxpayers last Monday night. You considered us, and there are many struggling to make ends meet by either working 2 jobs or cutting their budgets in order to pay for school property taxes and maintain some sort of a living in the community. About redistricting, our schools are currently about 85%. We do have room for students. We are told that the parents want classrooms of lesser children. Who wouldn't want that? But to do that, or that want, should be not at the taxpayer expense. 7.5% of our children are leaving the school for chartered schools.
1 minute.
That may not come back to the rise of parents deciding to choose their, educate their children elsewhere. In addition to redistricting, I would like to see to address the preschool. We are running a preschool and we're losing money. There are many good quality preschools in the area that children can attend. I don't think that we're a business. We're in the business to educate. Also, maybe it would be helpful to change the way that the school surveys. Surveys are usually done and sent to only parents. It should be sent to all the residents, people who are paying property taxes. Raising taxes not only hurts seniors, but it hurts young couples starting out and people that are single trying to maintain their homes. The wise decision of the board is to not vote for a massive construction project at the time. Instead, start and work on and obtain bids for our needs and not our wants.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Keener. Val Delp, High School Construction Project.
Good evening. So regarding the high school construction project and the bids coming in 23% over budget, I think we should take a close look at which pieces of it are necessities right now versus things that would be nice to have. I think Mr. Case made a great point at last week's meeting about surveying the community again on what they believe those priorities should be right now. In my opinion, the priority should be combining the upper and lower houses, the HVAC replacement in the lower house, and addressing safety concerns of the auditorium. I feel that anything above that is excessive spending at this time. Think of it this way. If a responsible head of household was looking to do, say, home renovations, and the estimates came back much higher than budgeted for, that person would probably consider other options. My own family is looking to add a patio to our backyard. We received a few estimates, and they came in on average $20,000 more than what we were willing to budget for it. So we considered other options, other lower cost but durable materials, subcontracting out some parts of it and doing some of it ourselves, and prioritizing what things we absolutely wanted versus what we could do without. I see you guys as in the role of the responsible heads of the household and the community as your family. And I would hope that you wouldn't want to intentionally jeopardize the financial stability of your family because you decided to overspend on wants. Also, in my experience as a financial advisor and the conversations I have with my clients every day, oftentimes we talk about tax consequences of possible financial transactions. And quite often, clients express to me their frustration around having to pay so many taxes on their hard-earned income and savings. And I can guarantee you they wouldn't be happy if you guys would move forward with this project as it is and pass that extra expense onto the taxpayers with a school tax increase. Please consider rejecting the bids at this time, reevaluating the priorities, scaling back the project to only what is necessary, and going back to bid with the new plans. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Lisa Marie Stoneha, expansion project.
Good evening. Tonight, I'm asking the board to please listen to the administration's suggestion and reject the bids and start over on these expansion projects. You're already over budget for Phase 1, and you haven't even addressed the other phases. Some of us took it upon ourselves to take these plans to different experts throughout the country that we have connections with and asked for their input. Overwhelmingly, they agreed not to do this now. They said, wait, and if you must, do what's absolutely necessary now and do the wants later. They predicted that doing these plans as laid out will increase our taxes well over 35% in the next few years. I understand that these projects are important and they were put on hold due to COVID, but I also understand things have changed. And this board needs to demonstrate that you can not only be flexible and adjust, but yet you are in tune with our community. Moving forward is fiscally irresponsible and a blatant disregard to the struggles that many are experiencing right now in our community. Right now, many in our community are struggling and are not making ends meet. It is evident with my conversations with many of you that you understand this, and you understand how hard things are for many in our community. We saw this understanding in the administration when they recommended to reject the bids and to go back to re-strategize. And many of you took a hard look into the question of what if the expansion taxes people out of their home to heart. Unfortunately, a few of you did not. In fact, one of you had a very disheartening response. One of you replied that these community members that may lose their home is, quote, not our problem. We cannot help if people make bad financial decisions, end quote. These projects are all of our problem. We are a community, and we don't push our agendas and push people out of their homes to get our agendas across. We do what's right for our community. And according to our equity policy, we're to be fair to all in all aspects. I ask the board to reject these bids.
1 minute.
Go back to the drawing board and get creative. Determine what we actually need right now and what is a want. Hold the wants off. I'm not saying not to do them, but do them later. Use your expertise and rely on experts. Listen to your administration. And to our administration and those of you on the board that continue to listen and do truly care about the community, thank you. You continue to demonstrate leadership. It is noticed and it's appreciated. Please reject these bids and show the community your strengths in hard times. Put something together that is more suitable for today's environment and for all in our community. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. George Stuck, $50 million renovation.
Thank you. By the way, I am here as a citizen, not as a supervisor, okay? So this is not anybody else's thoughts behind this. I would echo what they're saying. You know, do we really need $7 million baseball field down here when you used to use the Owls Field, which is a beautiful facility, okay, which is only, I don't know, what, a mile away? You know, but it seems like somebody has an ego somewhere in this school that we need to have a turf baseball and softball field. And as a small business owner, what you should really be looking at is the text. I enjoyed your report from the tech schools, because we really support the tech schools because we're in manufacturing. And I agree with you, Dr. Kennedy, about student success. You know, there's different ways you can grade students. You know, I was a horrible test taker in school, but now I own a small business and support many families, okay? So, thank you. But we really don't need all these things, and like some of the people said that, you know, these are, seems like some people's wants, and it's really not what our wants are, what our needs are, you know? So, that's my thoughts. So, thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Steck.
You're welcome.
Gwen Hill, expansion project.
Thank you for keeping this moving. I did pick Kansas to win it all, so I want to get home in an hour to watch the game. Sorry to any Nova fans or alumni in the room. I was asked to talk tonight because I work with senior citizens directly with my job with Medicare. So I wanted to educate you guys about the sandwich generation. I don't know if you've heard that term. If you haven't, it's a lot of us that are in this room. The sandwich generation are folks in their 30s, which I am not, but I'm going to pretend I am, their 40s and their 50s, and we're raising our children, and we're also helping out with our parents or older adult relatives. And at times it can be a lot. It is a lot to handle. Goals of most young adults, I know it was one of mine, was to move out of their parents' house. Our house didn't have a basement growing up, so that creepy adult living in your parents' basement was thankfully never an option for my brother or myself. But all joking aside, the goal for the senior population is to stay in their own homes as long as they can. It's not to move back in with their children or to go to some type of rest home, which unfortunately one of you was quoted saying a few months back, and that just really made me sad. All of us in the middle of the sandwich generation unfortunately have some tough conversation with older adults in our lives. If you haven't done so already, it's likely because maybe they're not physically with us anymore, and if that's the case, you have my heartfelt condolences. But the conversations I'm currently having with older members of my own family and the senior members of our Wilson community are sad and also infuriating. Yes, gas has gone up recently, and it was steadily climbing for a while. I do the grocery shopping in our house, and I've seen prices skyrocketing for almost 2 years now, especially meat. Products that once were $2, 2 for $5, are now 2 for $7 or more. Of course, that's not this board's fault, but these things are affecting our seniors greatly, and so do rising taxes. I know that some of you will say there's always community members complaining about taxes in the district or others that don't care about what, the kids' future. That's really not true. We got lots of grandparents that want nothing to do, that want nothing but the best for their grandkids in the district, but at what cost? This project is a monster and it's only going to get worse. There are wants and there are needs, and I've stood up here before and told you I'm not against all what you're trying to do. We're a sports family for sure. I always make my sports references. We have a Broadway actor in our family, so I definitely like the theater. But clearly, there are wants and there are needs, and even with 4 young children who would benefit from this. But it's just too much with inflation at a 40-year high. It's not monopoly money. Do not tax people out of their homes or their livelihoods. Please start being more fiscally responsible for all community members. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Jeff Janagavo, Renovations.
So I think I'm going to shock most of you. You ready? Dr. Kennedy, you and I agree on PSSAs tremendously. I've shared with you publicly, I've shared with you privately about our oldest son. I recall elementary years, middle school years, the utter stress caused by PSSA test scores. Not just my son, I remember in Scouts, working with the kids. This time of year, we used to roll into, when I was involved, Pinewood Derbies and banquets and end-of-year badges, and these 4th, 5th, 6th graders were stressed to the max on test scores. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, we need competency, but that's not always done by a test score. For everybody else listening, I know I have a lot of listeners in this district, and you as a board should understand that that's not a good thing, because the things that have been brought to my attention are not great. So for those listening tonight, yeah, I've commented once, but I'm going to continue to comment, and you all watching can just deal with that. But for everybody listening, business owner, I'm happy to hear we have another business owner in the audience, maybe more. Be Fresh at the Career Center is doing a fantastic job. They're at that Skills USA competition. I was actually talking with one of their students today on email as one of their advisory board members. They're putting, if they should get funding, which hopefully I can help them with. So there's a lot of ways to get around education. Specific to Renovations, I kind of called an audible there. I'm going to, just going to basically say ditto to most of what everybody else has said. I'm going to point out, if we're looking at these elementary numbers and we're looking at adding another school, I think our board administration should really be forthright with what's going to happen when we have 6 schools at about 600 kids. That's going to, by my math, is going to pump our high school numbers up about 20%, 15%. We're not adding a classroom with these renovations.
1 minute.
At all. So we're going to be Phase 1 high school renovations, Phase 2 elementary, Phase 3 Cornwall and Southern, which is actually the most pressing need. And then we're going to be right back into a whole other round of asking for money to address an increased population here in the high school when we just spent $50 million and didn't add a classroom. It doesn't seem very prudent to me to do that really at all. So I really think we need to think long and hard about what we're doing with this money. And also of note, one more thing for everybody else in the community to consider, not once was getting a $45 million bond put to the voters. And I know that's your purview as a board to do, but nobody asked the taxpayers if they wanted to go spend $45 million. Have a nice night.
Thank you for your comments. Chastity Santiago, Project Construction.
All right. So tonight I want to begin by quoting, I always begin with a quote, James W. Frick. He's the former Vice President of Public Relations for Alumni Affairs and Development at the University of Notre Dame. Don't tell me where your priorities are. Show me where you spend your money, and I'll tell you what they are. And I feel it's important to note that this quote was selected by Wilson students who approached me. I am here on behalf of them tonight. They wanted to be heard, they needed a voice, so they reached out to me. One of those being my son, which is amazing because he thinks his mom is crazy and never says, oh, that's my mom, the crazy lady at the school board meetings. And it's really sad that you guys have gotten him to that point, that he's asking me for help, which thank you for the bonding relationship, but I would have rather had it a different way. You know, he is failing to understand why our district can't do the same thing his mom does every day of her life on a global level. It's my responsibility to drive operational excellence by articulating problems, quantifying impact, implementing solutions, and defining success criteria and control measures, which I don't see from this board. I don't see that coming out of here. So, and also mitigating the impact to our employees, which, i.e., your students. You know, through research and talking with students, the district needs to answer these following questions. First of all, the iSTEM students. They want to understand how they don't have access to the very same materials that are needed for these building projects that are going to cost 20% more. Why can't they have them? Why are they to do without? Why are they being told to limit materials they can use, or they have to limit their projects? This is a program that these kids worked really hard to get into, and I don't see you guys doing anything for them. You know, they're not idiots. They got there for a reason. They are fully aware of the price of the materials that they need. They did the research. And they'll be reaching out to local businesses for help since this district won't help them. And I have volunteered to help them do that. So be prepared because there's going to be a lot of bad publicity. So, you know, when is this going to focus on academic excellence over athletics? These kids are sick of it. And I know I heard comments about AP courses not counting. It's not about the credits, it's about their accomplishment. It's what matters to them. It's $90 for an exam. That is over like close to $300 if you're taking multiple exams for some kids. And they can't afford that. The parents can't afford it. Before I ask my next question, I think it's important to preface that I am one of those English learners that'll never be proficient in English. Well, here I am to tell you it can happen. I speak 4 languages. My son speaks 2. We're very proficient in English. And the kids in Mississippi, they're smart too, so I didn't appreciate that either. But I know, you know, these testing scores, there's a lot going on with it. While I agree, yes, they may not tell us what we need to know, but there's a definite pattern of failure in 5th and 7th grade if you look at those scoring trends. Our kids are really smart and are proficient in advanced in 3rd and 4th grade. All of a sudden, they know nothing in 5th. They know nothing in 7th. What is going on? Find out the root cause before you get rid of it. Stop making solutions to problems that don't exist.
Okay, thank you. That's the end of the public participation. Do we have any board conversation? Mr. Martin, hand up first.
This will be fairly quick. Last week, I spoke about the needs to look at non-traditional occupations for our students and some possible ways of, you know, addressing that issue. And when I was talking, I referenced some different industries and so forth and trades. And I wasn't trying to make an exclusive list. So I do want to apologize if I left a certain industry out, especially farmers, from that list, because without them, we wouldn't be here tonight. So I do apologize, but it wasn't supposed to be an exclusive list. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Martin. Other conversation? Okay, I would like to make one comment, and if I'm incorrect on this, obviously, Dr. Fadley, you would correct this, but, or Mr. Martin, because it's financial related. For the community members who, because we've received emails as well, with the concern about tax increases due to this project. So I just want to make a distinction between the need for us to increase our millage year after year, that contributes, that money goes into our general fund, as opposed to a project similar to what we're talking about here, the $45 million, which we've already taken the bond out for. It's basically our secure money, correct? Dr. Faley, it's our money. And it was at a much lower interest rate that when we took it out, which is really good timing, than what it would be if we took it out even now, I'm assuming. Or in the coming months, that the idea is that the interest rate will go up for borrowing. Mr. Martin?
Yeah, the interest rates are starting to edge up. It wouldn't be much difference today. There's a few basis points we'd be paying more, but interest rates are anticipated to go up with the April meeting of the Federal Reserve Board. There's a potential to bump the interest rate, prime rate, by 50 basis points, which will obviously filter down eventually. Not the full 50 basis points, but that will filter back down.
Okay, thank you. So I think the point, the distinction I want to make is that when we take out a bond like this, that money is structured in our debt service every year. So our debt service for the district is just under $11 million. That number, and strategically, Mrs. Schlossman has structured it so that that number will not go up due to this project. It's your yearly millage will not increase due to this project. It extends our debt out, but it does not increase the yearly debt. So I just want to, and I've expressed this through email as well, to concerned community members, that this project is not going to increase your taxes. However, any increase to our general budget will, and that includes the main thing that would affect, or would affect our millage need in our general budget, is personnel. So as our district expands and we have more developments coming in and we have more kids coming in, Whitfield's a good example. Whitfield's relatively landlocked, so the increase in population to that is due to turnover. We have older community members leaving their homes. Who's going to move in to Whitfield, right by the school, right by all of our facilities? Younger families in general, obviously that's not every situation, but younger families who are then going to send their children to our schools. So that's Whitfield specifically, that's why their population is kind of over the top. So I just want to make the distinction between that. There are plenty of other arguments against possibly moving on forward with the full project. I just want to make sure that the understanding is it's not going to increase your annual school tax because of this project. So that's my input to that. Does anybody, any other comments? Okay, all right. Then I would like a motion to adjourn the meeting.
If I could just, Dr. Faley, if you could just sort of talk a little bit about the capacity at the high school, current capacity, and the capacity with regard to the feasibility study for, say, the next 5-10 years.
Do you want me to speak specifically to the capacity at the current high school, or some of the ideas that we've floated with capturing additional space in the future?
Yes, thank you.
So one of the ideas that we've discussed as an administrative team is for future expansion at the high school is utilization of the building we are currently in, which was the old high school. There is quite a bit of space that currently exists here that could be retrofitted into classroom space in the event that the high school population were to increase. And it's also important that you keep in mind that we want to continue to follow the trends as they relate to our demographics and the increases, not only at the elementary level, at the middle level, and at the high school level. There is currently space in our high school to add students. although that space would come to a difficulty if we added several hundred more students, and that's when we would need to have discussions about additional space that currently exists, that's just currently office space. So there are things that have been discussed in terms of our secondary, at least the high school expansion. Currently, we do have quite a bit of space at West, and with the recommendations that we have proposed through the feasibility study with Southern Middle School, that will also add additional space there. So we feel very comfortable with our secondary space issues at this time. The concern that we go back to, and I think this is to Mrs. Cocker's point, is our concern with our growth is really centered around the elementary schools and the capacity at our elementary schools. The debt service that President Cocker spoke about is set at just under $11 million. The impact of borrowing that $45 million bond borrowing does not, as she indicated, affect the millage. What it does in fact do is extends the time frame for repayment of the debt out. I believe it was 7 years, if I remember correctly, approximately 7 years. So there is a cost on the tail end of that borrowing. However, she is correct in stating that it will not affect the millage within our current budget and budgets in the subsequent years. We've talked a lot about staffing a new elementary school. That is one of the items that will impact the millage, and I think it's important that we are extremely transparent. In order for us to do that moving forward, there will need to be millage increases, not only in this year, but in the subsequent next 4 years, in order for us to staff that facility, should the board decide to build an additional elementary school. But to your point, Mr. Case, there is space. There is space here in this building, several floors that could be converted into additional high school space.
5 potential science labs, correct? In the old cafeteria at the lower house.
In the event the board chose to move forward with the project and eliminated the ad alternate of the science labs, those facilities will be plumbed up to the studs so that there could be additional capacity for classrooms gained in the future. It would still be at a cost, but not as expensive as if we were to have to bring in all the utilities and all of those types of things to that space.
Thank you.
Okay, any other further discussion? Okay, looking for a motion to adjourn. Mr. Martin, thank you. Meeting is adjourned.